I'm Samantha Reed, 32, and I'll never forget my cousin Caitlin's birthday dinner last spring. As I settled at the elegant restaurant table, my sister Heather leaned forward with a champagne flute in hand and that signature smug smile. "Where's your +1, Sam? Still no boyfriend?" Everyone laughed, not knowing I'd discovered texts on my ex-fiancé's phone 2 weeks earlier. Texts from Heather. That night I smiled politely, but I knew something they didn't. Their secret affair wouldn't stay hidden much longer. If you're watching this and have ever dealt with family betrayal, drop a comment below telling me what state you're watching from. I never expected my own story would resonate with so many of you. Hit that subscribe button if you want more real family drama stories like mine, because trust me, what happened next changed everything for our family forever. Growing up with Heather was like living in perpetual shadow. At 35, she was everything our parents Rebecca and Michael ever wanted in a daughter. Beautiful, poised, and successful as a marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company. She married Craig, a wealthy investment banker, right after college and promptly delivered 2 perfect children, Emma, now 7, and Liam, 5. Their family photos looked like they belonged in a Pottery Barn catalog. I, on the other hand, was always the afterthought. While Heather was winning beauty pageants and being crowned prom queen, I was the awkward younger sister with braces and glasses. Our parents never bothered to hide their favoritism. At family dinners, Dad would proudly announce Heather's latest promotion or vacation to Bora Bora, while my achievements as an architect barely warranted a mention. "Samantha designed a new community center," Mom would say dismissively, before quickly pivoting. "But did you hear about Heather's fundraiser? She raised $50,000 for charity." After years of this treatment, I learned to expect the subtle put-downs. When I got a promotion at my architecture firm, Mom said, "That's nice, dear. Maybe someday you'll be as successful as your sister." When I bought my first condo, Dad remarked, "It's cute. Small but cute." Nothing like Heather's lakefront property, of course. The most frustrating part was Heather's behavior. She never defended me. Instead, she'd offer backhanded compliments that only reinforced my perceived inadequacy. "Sam finally found a decent guy," she once announced at Thanksgiving dinner. Who would have thought someone would want my little sister? Everyone laughed while I forced a smile, pretending it was all good fun. That's why meeting Jason felt like finally catching a break. He was handsome, successful, and seemed genuinely interested in me. A corporate attorney with a quick wit and kind eyes, he didn't compare me to anyone else. When he proposed after 18 months of dating, I felt like I'd finally have something of my own to celebrate. Something even Heather couldn't diminish. We bought a small but beautiful apartment together. I threw myself into decorating it, creating the perfect home for our future. I remember bringing Heather over for the first time, watching her eyes assess every corner. "It's surprisingly nice," she said, running her fingers along our new sofa. Jason must have good taste, the implication being that I didn't. Still, I was happy. For once, my life seemed to be on track. Jason and I set a wedding date, and I started planning what I hoped would be a perfect day. I even asked Heather to be my maid of honor, thinking it might help bridge the gap between us. "Of course I will," she'd said, hugging me. "I've been to so many weddings, I can make sure yours doesn't turn into a disaster." Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs with Jason. The late nights at the office that started becoming more frequent, the way he'd take his phone with him even to the bathroom, how he'd turn the screen away when I walked into the room. But I was so caught up in finally having something good, I ignored the red flags waving right in front of me. "Working late again?" I'd ask when he came home at midnight. "Big case," he'd reply, giving me a quick peck on the cheek before heading to the shower. During family gatherings, I noticed he and Heather often seemed to be having private jokes. Once, at my parents' anniversary party, I returned from the bathroom to find them standing unusually close together by the punch bowl, their conversation ending abruptly when they saw me. "Just getting wedding advice from your sister," Jason explained with a grin. "She's full of wisdom." Heather smiled. "Just making sure your big day is perfect, sis." I believed them. I wanted to believe them. After all, what sister would go after her younger sibling's fiancé? What kind of person could smile at you across Sunday dinner knowing they were betraying you in the worst possible way? I was about to find out exactly what kind of person my sister really was. It happened on a Tuesday. Ordinary days are always the ones that change your life forever. I'd forgotten my phone at home while rushing to an early client meeting. When I returned to grab it, Jason was in the shower, getting ready for work. His phone pinged on the nightstand. Once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. I never checked his phone. I trusted him. But something about the persistence of those notifications made me curious. I glanced at the screen and saw multiple texts from H-Work with a simple preview. Last night was. I knew in my gut who H-Work was. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone. Jason didn't have a passcode. He'd always said he had nothing to hide from me. A few swipes revealed the full conversation with my sister. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. I want you again. Hotel tomorrow? Same time? I love how you touch me. So much better than. I couldn't read anymore. My vision blurred with tears as I scrolled up, seeing hundreds of messages spanning back 8 months. 8 months. Almost half our engagement. There were explicit photos Heather had sent him, detailed accounts of their encounters, plans for meetups during family events when I thought she was working late or he was at the gym. The most devastating message was from Christmas. She's helping Mom in the kitchen. Meet me upstairs in 5. I remembered that day clearly. I'd been making eggnog with Mom while Heather claimed she had a work emergency to handle. Jason had offered to get more ice from the store. They'd both returned around the same time, looking slightly flushed, which they attributed to the cold outside. They'd been sleeping together in my parents' house while I was downstairs cooking. When Jason stepped out of the shower, I was sitting on the bed, his phone in my hand. His face went from confusion to shock to a pathetic attempt at damage control. "Sam, I can explain," he started, clutching his towel. "Explain what? How you've been fucking my sister behind my back for 8 months? While planning our wedding?" My voice was unnaturally calm. "It just happened," he said, "the oldest excuse in the book. We never meant to hurt you." I laughed, a hollow sound I didn't recognize. "You never meant to hurt me? You've been sleeping with my sister. In my parents' house. On Christmas." He tried to touch me, and I recoiled. "Don't you dare." What followed was a blur of accusations, weak excuses, and finally, his pathetic confession. "It started at your parents' Christmas party," he admitted. "She came on to me while you were in the kitchen. I was drunk. It was supposed to be a one-time thing. But it wasn't, was it? You kept going back for more." He couldn't look me in the eye. Heather can be very persuasive. "And you're very weak," I replied, slipping my engagement ring off and placing it on the nightstand. "We're done. I want you out of here by tomorrow." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care. Go to Heather, go to hell, just get out of my sight." He made one last attempt. "She doesn't mean anything to me. It was just physical." "That makes it worse, not better," I said, grabbing my purse. "And for the record, she's still married with 2 children. Did that ever cross your mind? What kind of person destroys a family for a cheap thrill?" I walked out, spent the day in a daze at a coffee shop, and returned that night only after confirming with our doorman that Jason had left with several suitcases. I changed the locks the next day. The hardest part wasn't losing Jason. It was realizing that Heather had deliberately targeted him, knowing how much it would hurt me. She could have any man she wanted. Why did she need mine? I didn't tell anyone the real reason for the breakup. I simply said we'd grown apart and realized we weren't right for each other. I couldn't bear the thought of the family knowing, of the drama it would cause. What about Craig? What about Emma and Liam? So I kept quiet, moved on with my life, and tried to avoid Heather as much as possible. But she didn't make it easy. In fact, she seemed to take special pleasure in my pain, making references to the broken engagement whenever possible. What she didn't realize was that every dig, every smug smile, was building something dangerous inside me. Not just pain, but resolve. I might have been the family doormat all my life, but I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not anymore. Caitlin's birthday dinner came 6 weeks after I discovered the affair. I almost didn't go. The thought of sitting across from Heather, maintaining the facade that nothing was wrong, made me physically ill, but skipping another family event would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. The restaurant was exactly the kind of upscale place Caitlin loved. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in bow ties discreetly hovering. The perfect setting for the drama about to unfold. Our entire extended family was there. Mom and Dad, Aunt Judith and Uncle Tom, cousins Ryan and Caitlin with their spouses, and of course, Heather and Craig with their perfect children in perfectly coordinated outfits. Craig greeted me with a warm hug. "Sam, good to see you. How are you holding up?" His genuine concern made my stomach twist. He had no idea his wife was sleeping with my ex. "I'm managing," I replied, trying not to look at Heather, who was watching our interaction with that familiar smirk. Aunt Judith swooped in next. "Samantha, darling, you look tired. Breakups are so hard at your age. It gets harder to find someone good the older you get." "Thanks for the reminder, Aunt Judith," I said dryly. The seating arrangement couldn't have been worse. I was directly across from Heather and Craig, with a perfect view of their picture-perfect family. Throughout the appetizers, Heather kept touching Craig's arm affectionately, playing the devoted wife while shooting me knowing glances. "Your hair looks different," she commented as I reached for my water. "Trying something new after the breakup? That's brave." Uncle Tom, always oblivious to tension, decided to bring up my relationship status. "So what happened with that lawyer fellow? Jason, right? He seemed like a good catch." Before I could answer, Heather jumped in. "Sometimes things don't work out, Uncle Tom. Sam probably wants to focus on her career anyway. Not everyone is cut out for marriage." "I like Jason," my mother added unhelpfully. "He had such a good job. You two seemed happy at Christmas." I nearly choked on my wine, remembering exactly what Jason and Heather had been doing at Christmas while I was making eggnog. "People aren't always what they seem, Mom," I said quietly. The conversation mercifully moved on to Caitlin's recent promotion, but Heather wasn't done with me. As the main course arrived, she leaned forward with that champagne flute in her hand and that smug smile plastered across her face. "Where's your +1, Sam? Still no boyfriend?" she asked loudly enough for the entire table to hear. Everyone laughed, that uncomfortable family laughter that masks discomfort with forced joviality. I smiled politely while rage boiled inside me. If they only knew. "I'm focusing on myself right now," I replied evenly. "Smart," Craig said kindly. "Take time to heal." Heather shot him a look before turning back to me. "It must be so hard, coming to these family events alone while everyone else is paired up. So brave of you." I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone before I said something I couldn't take back. As I was about to push open the door, I heard Heather's voice from inside. "I can't tonight. Craig wants to watch a movie with the kids." A pause. "No, it's fine. Tomorrow works better anyway. Sam's here and she's pathetic as usual." Another pause. "Of course she doesn't know. She's clueless. Always has been." I froze, my hand on the door. "Look, I have to go. Meet me tomorrow at the usual place, 1 o'clock. When Heather emerged, she startled at the sight of me. For a split second, uncertainty flashed across her face. Then the mask slipped back into place. "Bathroom's all yours, sis," she said, brushing past me. I stood there, trembling with fury and hurt. She was still seeing him. Still betraying not just me, but Craig and their children. And she had the audacity to mock me for being alone at family gatherings when she was the reason I was alone in the first place. When I returned to the table, Heather was showing everyone photos of Emma's dance recital on her phone. Craig looked at his wife with such pride and love that it made my chest hurt. He was a good man. He didn't deserve this. "These are wonderful," he said, his arm around Heather. "Our little ballerina." Heather beamed at him before catching my eye across the table. The look she gave me was clear. "I have everything and you have nothing." But what Heather didn't realize was that the dinner had changed something fundamental in me. Watching her play the devoted wife and mother while secretly arranging trysts with my ex-fiancé had crystallized my decision. The truth needed to come out, not just for me, but for Craig and the children, for everyone who had been deceived by Heather's perfect facade. As dessert was served and Caitlin opened her gifts, I sat quietly, formulating a plan. Heather thought she had won, that I would continue to suffer in silence while she had both her family and my fiancé. She was wrong. The reckoning was coming, and Heather had no idea what was about to hit her. I couldn't sleep that night after the birthday dinner. My mind kept replaying Heather's phone conversation, her smug smile, the way she flaunted her perfect life while secretly destroying it from within. The worst part was knowing Craig and the children were collateral damage in her games. I always liked Craig. Unlike the rest of the family, he never compared me to Heather or made me feel less than. He remembered my birthday every year with thoughtful gifts that showed he actually paid attention to my interests. When I completed my first major architectural project, he framed a photo of the building and gave it to me at Christmas. "You're going to leave your mark on the world, Sam," he'd said. "I'm proud to be related to such a talented architect." It was the first time anyone in the family had expressed genuine pride in my work. Then there were Emma and Liam. Sweet, innocent kids who adored their mother and had no idea who she really was. How would this affect them? Children of divorce often struggle, but children who discover their mother's infidelity? That could leave lasting scars. The next morning, I called Tara, my best friend since college, and the only person who knew the truth about Jason and Heather. "I heard her arranging to meet him again," I said after explaining what happened at the birthday dinner. "She's still seeing him, Tara. And she's flaunting it in front of me while playing the perfect wife and mother." "That bitch," Tara said bluntly. She never minced words. "You need to tell Craig. He deserves to know his wife is cheating on him. But what about the kids? This will blow up their entire world. And what's better, growing up in a house built on lies? Having a mother who teaches them that betrayal is acceptable as long as you don't get caught? Trust me, as a child of divorce, knowing the truth is better than living in a toxic environment." I sighed, knowing she was right but still hesitant. "I just don't want to be the one who destroys their family." "You're not destroying anything," Tara insisted. "Heather did that the moment she decided to sleep with your fiancé. You're just bringing the truth to light." After hanging up, I spent hours researching affair recovery, family dynamics, and betrayal trauma. I read heartbreaking accounts from children who discovered a parent's infidelity, spouses who were the last to know about their partner's affairs, and families torn apart by secrets. One story particularly resonated with me: a man who discovered his brother had been sleeping with his wife for years. He wrote about the pain of the double betrayal, but also about the freedom that came with finally knowing the truth. "Living in ignorance isn't protection," he wrote. "It's imprisonment." Every day I spent not knowing was another day I lived in a lie constructed by the people who claimed to love me most. I thought of Craig, going about his life, working hard for his family, completely unaware that his wife was betraying him in the most intimate way possible. If the situations were reversed, wouldn't I want to know? The decision crystallized. Craig needed to know the truth. But I couldn't just blurt it out without evidence. Heather would deny everything, paint me as jealous and vindictive, the unstable sister lashing out after a failed engagement. I needed proof so irrefutable that not even Heather could spin her way out of it. I started developing a methodical plan. First, I needed to confirm the affair was ongoing. Then, I needed to gather evidence that couldn't be disputed. Finally, I needed to find a way to present this information that would minimize damage to Craig and the children. As I wrote down my thoughts, a notification appeared on my phone, a family group text from Heather. "Hosting a summer BBQ next Saturday at our place. Everyone's invited. Craig's firing up the grill." I stared at the message, imagining Heather playing hostess while secretly texting Jason, perhaps even arranging to meet him before or after the event. The audacity was breathtaking. My fingers hovered over the phone. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth and consequences. About not letting Heather continue to manipulate and hurt people who trusted her. If you've ever been stuck between exposing a painful truth or protecting people you care about, you know exactly the dilemma I was facing. Sometimes the right choice isn't the easiest one. Leave a comment if you've ever had to make a difficult decision that would hurt people in the short term but protect them in the long run. I had no idea my choice would completely transform our family dynamics, but I knew I couldn't let the deception continue. The next morning, I woke with a clear purpose. If I was going to expose Heather and Jason, I needed undeniable proof. Accusations without evidence would only make me look bitter and vindictive. I started with what I already had, screenshots of the text conversations I'd found on Jason's phone. I'd had the presence of mind to email them to myself before confronting him. But these only proved the affair had happened, not that it was ongoing. My first move was surprisingly easy. I called Jason under the pretense of discussing the remaining items he'd left at my apartment. "I'm not ready to see you yet," I said, recording the conversation with an app Tara had recommended. "It's still too painful." "I understand," he replied, sounding relieved he didn't have to face me. Maybe in a few weeks? I just need to know one thing, I said, keeping my voice steady. Are you still seeing her? A pause. Sam, I don't think this is productive. Just tell me. I deserve that much. Another pause. We're in contact, yes, but it's complicated. Complicated how? You're either sleeping with my sister or you're not. Look, Heather has a lot to lose. She's trying to figure things out with Craig. Bingo. He just admitted they were still involved and mentioned both Heather and Craig by name. I saved the recording. Next, I needed to establish a pattern. Based on what I'd overheard at the restaurant, they had a usual place and Heather had mentioned meeting at 1 o'clock. I took a personal day from work the following Thursday and parked across from Jason's office building. Sure enough, at 12:45 p.m., he emerged and walked quickly to a nearby hotel, the Madison, an upscale establishment with discreet side entrances, perfect for adulterous rendezvous. 20 minutes later, Heather's silver Audi pulled into the parking garage. I took photos of her car entering, then of her walking into the same hotel, sunglasses on, head down. 3 hours later, they left separately. Jason first, then Heather 30 minutes after. I repeated this surveillance the following week, documenting the same pattern. They were creatures of habit, meeting regularly at the same time, same place. Digging deeper, I accessed our old joint credit card account, which Jason had continued to use. There were regular charges at the Madison Hotel, always on Thursdays. But more shocking were the purchases at Tiffany's, Gucci, and other high-end retailers, gifts for Heather that Jason had been buying with what was partially my money when we were still together. I discovered that several of Heather's business trips coincided perfectly with Jason's conference weekends, including one to Chicago during our family's annual 4th of July barbecue, which Heather had missed, claiming she had an emergency client meeting. I found Instagram posts from a mutual friend who had spotted them at a restaurant in Chicago, though they weren't together in the photo. Each discovery felt like a fresh wound, but also strengthened my resolve. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a brief lapse in judgment. This was a calculated, ongoing deception that had been happening right under my nose, under all our noses, for the better part of a year. The final piece came unexpectedly. I was at the mall, mindlessly browsing to distract myself, when I overheard a familiar voice one aisle over. "She's totally clueless," Heather was saying, laughing. "You should have seen her at the birthday dinner, all sad and pathetic because Jason dumped her. If she only knew he left her for me." I froze, slowly taking out my phone and pressing record. "I almost feel bad for her," she continued to, whoever she was with, almost. "But seriously, she's always been so self-righteous, thinking she's so special with her little buildings and her perfect moral code. It's about time someone took her down a peg." "But what about Craig?" asked another voice. Nancy, one of Heather's friends. "Craig's fine. He suspects nothing. Men are so easy to manage when they're getting regular sex and home-cooked meals. Besides, he's always traveling for work. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. And the kids? What about them? They're fine. Everything's fine. I've got it all under control." I'd heard enough. I stopped the recording and slipped away before they could spot me. My hands were shaking with anger. This wasn't just an affair. This was deliberate cruelty. Heather had targeted Jason specifically to hurt me. She was proud of destroying my relationship. And worse, she had no remorse about betraying Craig and potentially damaging her children. She thought she had everything under control. I organized all my evidence chronologically. 1. Original text messages and photos from Jason's phone. 2. Recorded call with Jason admitting ongoing contact. 3. Photos of their Thursday hotel meetings. 4. Credit card statements showing hotel charges and gifts. 5. Proof of their secret trip to Chicago during a family event. 6. The damning recording of Heather mocking me and dismissing concerns about Craig and the children. I made multiple copies, storing them in the cloud and on a secure USB drive. Then I reached out to a lawyer friend for advice on the legal implications of sharing this information. She confirmed that while uncomfortable, nothing about revealing the affair was illegal, as long as the evidence was obtained legally and shared only with relevant parties. "Just be prepared for backlash," she warned. "People often shoot the messenger in these situations." I was counting on that. Heather would absolutely try to paint me as the villain, but with this much evidence, even she couldn't talk her way out of it. The final question was how to proceed. I couldn't just email everything to Craig or confront Heather publicly at a family event. This required sensitivity and privacy. The answer came when I ran into Craig at a coffee shop near his office. It wasn't planned, but it felt like fate. "Sam, great to see you," he said, giving me a quick hug. "How are you holding up?" I looked at his kind face, his genuine concern, and made a decision. "Actually, Craig, I need to talk to you about something important. Something difficult. Could we meet somewhere private?" His expression grew serious. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "No," I said honestly. "It's not. But you deserve to know the truth. You're scaring me a bit." "What's this about?" "It's about Heather," I said quietly, "and Jason, and me, but mostly about you." His face changed subtly, as if some part of him had always suspected something wasn't right. "My office," he said. "Tomorrow at noon. We won't be disturbed." I nodded, knowing there was no turning back now. The day of reckoning was upon us, and nothing would ever be the same again. 2 days after meeting Craig and showing him the evidence, we all gathered at my parents' house to celebrate my father's retirement. It was a bittersweet occasion. Dad had worked for the same engineering firm for 40 years, and while he claimed to be looking forward to fishing and traveling with Mom, I knew he was struggling with the transition. Under normal circumstances, I would have been focused on supporting him. But these weren't normal circumstances. Craig now knew the truth about Heather and Jason, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Heather and Craig arrived separately. She claimed he had a meeting that ran late, but I knew better. He had been meeting with a divorce attorney. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face haggard. He'd insisted on attending the party to maintain appearances until they decided how to handle things with the family and, most importantly, the children. When Craig entered, Heather's smile faltered momentarily. I watched her recover quickly, giving him a kiss on the cheek that he barely acknowledged. She glanced at me suspiciously, but I kept my expression neutral. "Dad's out back setting up the grill," Mom said, oblivious to the undercurrents. "Heather, would you help me with the salad?" "Samantha, get your father a drink, would you?" Same old dynamic. Heather got the important tasks. I was relegated to drink service. I brought Dad his favorite bourbon, finding him arranging chairs on the patio. "Proud of you, Dad," I said, genuinely meaning it. 40 years is quite an achievement. He smiled, looking momentarily vulnerable. "Thanks, sweetheart. Feels strange to be done. Your mother has a whole itinerary planned for the next year. Not sure I'll get much rest in retirement." "You've earned whatever you want to do," I replied. "This is your time now." He squeezed my shoulder affectionately, a rare gesture from my normally reserved father. The evening progressed with forced normalcy. Craig remained quiet, nursing a single beer for hours. Heather overcompensated with excessive cheerfulness, touching his arm frequently, only to have him subtly pull away each time. Then, to my shock, Jason arrived. "Look who I invited," Heather announced as she ushered him onto the patio. "I thought we could use another person to help celebrate. We're all still friends, right?" The audacity was breathtaking. Craig's face went white, then red. I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. "What are you doing here?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Jason looked uncomfortable. "Heather invited me. She said it would be fine." "And you thought showing up at my father's retirement party after what happened between us was a good idea?" I countered. Mom intervened. "Samantha, don't make a scene. Heather was just being inclusive. Jason's practically family." The irony of her statement made me laugh out loud, drawing concerned looks. "Sorry," I said. "Not sorry at all, just caught off guard." Dinner was excruciating. Jason sat between Heather and Mom, charming everyone as usual. Craig continued his stony silence, while I struggled to maintain my composure. Dad, sensing something was off but not knowing what, tried to keep conversation flowing with questions about everyone's work. After the main course, Heather stood up, clinking her glass for attention. "I have an announcement," she said, smiling broadly. "Craig and I are planning a big family vacation to Hawaii this summer, and you're all invited. We've already booked a beautiful villa with enough room for everyone." She paused dramatically. "And of course Jason will come too. We could all use some sunshine and family bonding time." Craig's head snapped up. This was clearly news to him. "First I'm hearing of this," he said quietly. Heather laughed it off. "I wanted it to be a surprise for everyone, honey. I've been planning it for weeks. Planning a lot of things behind my back, aren't you?" The edge in his voice was unmistakable. A tense silence fell over the table. Mom looked confused. Dad stopped mid-bite. "What's that supposed to mean?" Heather asked, her smile faltering. Craig just shook his head and excused himself from the table. As conversation awkwardly resumed, Heather slipped away after him. I followed discreetly, worried about what might unfold. They were in the kitchen, voices low but intense. "What was that about?" Heather demanded. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." "I embarrassed you?" Craig's voice was controlled but tight with anger. "You invited your lover to a family dinner and announced a vacation without consulting me. After everything I've learned this week?" Heather's expression changed from indignation to calculation. "What are you talking about?" "Don't," Craig warned. "Don't insult my intelligence by lying anymore, Heather. I know about you and Jason. I've seen the evidence." Her eyes darted to where I stood in the doorway. "What have you been telling him, Samantha?" "More of your pathetic, jealous lies because Jason chose me over you?" "He didn't choose you over me," I said calmly, stepping into the kitchen. "I dumped him when I found your texts on his phone. I've known about your affair for months." Her face contorted with fury. "You had no right to interfere in my marriage. And you had no right to sleep with my fiancé," I countered. "But here we are." She turned back to Craig, switching tactics. Her voice softened, eyes welling with tears. "It was a mistake, Craig. A stupid mistake that meant nothing. Samantha is blowing it out of proportion because she's always been jealous of what we have." "What we had?" Craig corrected. "And it wasn't a one-time mistake. You've been seeing him for nearly a year, including when you claimed to be on business trips." "I've seen the hotel receipts, Heather, the text messages. I heard the recording of you laughing about how clueless I am." Heather's face went pale. "You recorded me? That's illegal." "Actually, it's not," I replied. "Not in this state. And it doesn't change the truth of what you said." She turned on me then, mask fully dropped, revealing the person she truly was. "You've always wanted to destroy my life. You've resented me since we were children because I was better than you at everything. Mom and Dad always preferred me. Everyone did. You couldn't stand that, could you? So you had to ruin the one good thing in my life." "The one good thing?" Craig interjected. "What about our children, Heather? What about our family? Did that mean anything to you at all?" She dismissed him with a wave. "Of course the kids matter. Don't be dramatic. This has nothing to do with them." "It has everything to do with them. You were willing to break apart their family for what? Some cheap thrill with your sister's fiancé?" "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "Jason and I have a connection. We understand each other." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "A connection? Is that what you call it? Because in the texts I saw, it seemed pretty physical. Or was there some deep intellectual component to your hotel meetings I missed?" She advanced on me, finger pointing. "You stay out of this. This is between me and my husband." "No," Craig said firmly. "Samantha's involved because you involved her. You deliberately went after her fiancé. Why? What did she ever do to deserve that kind of betrayal?" Heather's composure finally cracked. "She existed. Always there. Always the poor little victim everyone needed to protect. Poor Samantha. Not as pretty, not as successful, not as special. But Dad always had a soft spot for you, didn't he? Samantha's so creative. Samantha's so thoughtful. Samantha's going to make her mark on the world." I stared at her, stunned. "You did this because Dad complimented my work?" "He never looked at my accomplishments the same way he looked at yours," she spat. "No matter what I achieved, it was never enough for him. I gave him successful grandchildren, a son-in-law with the right pedigree, the perfect daughter on paper. But he lights up when you walk in the room with your stupid building designs." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these years, I'd thought I was the one who wasn't enough. I'd never realized Heather felt the same way, just about a different parent. "So you slept with Jason to hurt me? To take away the one thing in my life that was working?" She didn't deny it. "I wanted you to feel what it's like to not be the special one for once." Craig looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Don't be so self-righteous, she snapped. Men have affairs all the time. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything, he replied quietly. It means you're not the person I thought I married. The kitchen door swung open, and Mom stood there, face ashen. What is going on in here? Everyone can hear you. Behind her, Jason appeared, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Dad followed, confusion giving way to understanding as he surveyed the scene. Tell them, Heather, I said. Tell everyone what you've been doing behind our backs. She straightened, regaining her composure with remarkable speed. Samantha is upset because Jason and I have feelings for each other. It happened after they broke up. That's not true, Jason interjected, surprising everyone. Heather, we can't keep lying. It started while I was still with Sam. You pursued me. Heather's eyes widened in betrayal. Shut up, Jason. No, I'm done lying, he continued. Craig, sir, Mr. Reed. I'm sorry. What we did was wrong. Heather made it seem like it wouldn't hurt anyone if no one found out, but people did find out. Craig finished for him. And people are hurt. Deeply hurt. Mom looked between all of us, horrified. Heather, please tell me this isn't true. For the first time, Heather had no ready answer. The perfect facade had finally cracked beyond repair. Dad stepped forward, his voice heavy with disappointment. I think it's time everyone went home. Heather, Jason, I suggest you leave separately. Craig, you're welcome to stay here tonight if you need space. In that moment, watching my sister's perfect life crumble before our eyes, I felt no satisfaction. Only sadness for the wreckage she'd caused and the people hurt in her quest to prove something to herself. The reckoning had arrived, and none of us would ever be the same. The week after my father's retirement party was the quietest our family had experienced in decades. No group texts, no invitations to brunches or movie nights. The usual steady stream of photos Heather posted of the children abruptly ceased. It was as if we'd all retreated to separate corners to lick our wounds and process what had happened. I hadn't planned for the confrontation to unfold so publicly. My intention had been for Craig to handle the situation privately with Heather, minimizing the trauma to their children. But Heather's audacity in inviting Jason to the party had accelerated everything. 3 days after the party, Craig texted asking to meet at his office. When I arrived, he looked exhausted but calmer than at the party. I've been staying at a hotel, he explained, gesturing for me to sit. Heather's at the house with the kids. We told them Daddy has a big work project, but they're smart. They know something's wrong. I'm so sorry, Craig. I never wanted the children to be hurt by this. He nodded. I know. That's why I wanted to talk to you. First, thank you for having the courage to tell me the truth. It would have been easier for you to stay silent. Not really, I admitted. Watching her continue to deceive you while flaunting her relationship with Jason, I couldn't bear it. Still, many people would have looked the other way. Family dynamics are complicated. He ran a hand through his hair. Which brings me to why I asked you here. I'm filing for divorce. It wasn't surprising, but hearing it stated so definitively made it real. I've consulted with an attorney who specializes in high-conflict divorces, he continued. Given the extensive evidence of infidelity in Heather's unstable behavior lately, I'm seeking primary custody of the children. How is she taking it? About as well as you'd expect. Between rage and manipulation. 1 minute she's threatening to take me for everything I'm worth, the next she's crying and saying she'll change. He looked down at his hands. The most disturbing part is how she's trying to use the children as bargaining chips. My heart sank. What do you mean? She suggested that if I give her a more favorable financial settlement, she might be open to a more generous custody arrangement. His voice tightened with anger, as if they're assets to be divided. That's horrible. Those kids adore you. And I them. Which is why I won't let her use them as pawns. He straightened in his chair. But I need your help, Sam. Anything, I said immediately. Heather is telling everyone who will listen that you fabricated the whole thing out of jealousy. That you doctored evidence, manipulated recordings, and poisoned me against her because you couldn't stand to see her happy while your engagement failed. I wasn't surprised. It was exactly the kind of deflection I'd expected. She's reached out to your parents, your extended family, even mutual friends from college, he continued. She's trying to control the narrative. And people are believing her? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Heather had always been the family darling. Some are, others are reserving judgment. But I'm concerned about how this might affect custody proceedings if she can paint you as unstable or vindictive. By extension, she'll argue that I'm being manipulated and making decisions based on false information. I understood immediately. You need me to reach out to people first, make sure they know my side before she poisons the well completely. He nodded. The truth is on our side, but Heather is very convincing, and she's desperate now. We spent the next hour developing a strategy. I would contact key family members individually, not to trash Heather, but to calmly present the facts. Craig would gather additional evidence of Heather's inappropriate behavior since the confrontation, including text messages where she'd threatened him. What about the children? I asked. How much do they know? Nothing specific yet, Craig replied. We've agreed to tell them together this weekend. A child psychologist will be present to help navigate the conversation. That's good. They deserve the truth, but in an age-appropriate way. He agreed. They need to understand this isn't their fault, and that while their parents won't be living together, they are still loved by both of us. Despite everything, Craig was still trying to protect Heather's relationship with their children. It spoke volumes about his character. Over the next few days, I made difficult calls to family members. Aunt Judith was skeptical until I played a portion of the recording where Heather mocked Craig's obliviousness. Uncle Tom was silent for a long time before finally saying, I always thought there was something off about her perfect life. Too perfect, you know. My cousins Ryan and Caitlin were more immediately supportive. Heather called me crying yesterday, Caitlin admitted. But her story had holes. And honestly, I've seen how she treats you at family gatherings. I believe you, Sam. The hardest conversation was with my parents. Mom had been calling daily, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails about healing the family and working things out. Dad hadn't reached out at all. I finally visited them at home, bringing copies of the evidence for them to review privately. I don't need to see it, Mom said immediately. I know my daughters. Heather wouldn't do this. Rebecca, Dad said quietly, we need to look at what Samantha brought. Why? Mom demanded. So we can further destroy our family? Heather made a mistake. People have affairs. It's not the end of the world. It wasn't just an affair, Mom, I said gently. It was a deliberate attempt to hurt me, and it's still going on. She's shown no remorse, only anger at being caught. She's your sister, Mom insisted. Family forgives. Even when there's no repentance? Dad asked, surprising both of us. Even when the behavior continues? Mom turned to him, shocked. Michael, whose side are you on? The side of truth, he said firmly. Heather has always been your project, Rebecca. Your perfect daughter who could do no wrong. And look where that's got her. Look what she's done to her sister, her husband, potentially her children. Mom burst into tears, but Dad continued, turning to me. I'll look at what you've brought, Samantha, and I'll talk to Craig. He's a good man who deserves better than this. It was the most my father had ever stood up to my mother, and the most he'd ever stood up for me. By the end of the week, Craig and I had connected with everyone who mattered. Some, like my mother, were still in denial. Others were shocked but ultimately supportive. The important thing was that Heather could no longer control the narrative completely. Craig texted me the night before the planned conversation with the children. Heather has agreed to a supervised confrontation tomorrow after we talk to the kids. My lawyer will be present, along with the family therapist. Would you be willing to be there too? Having everyone involved in one room might help establish the full truth. I hesitated. Facing Heather again, especially after I'd reached out to family members, would be volatile, but Craig was right. This needed to be resolved directly, with witnesses present to prevent further manipulation. I'll be there, I replied. What time? 4 p.m. at Dr. Winter's office. Thank you, Sam. I know this isn't easy. As I prepared for what would undoubtedly be an explosive meeting, I thought about how differently things had turned out from what I'd originally planned. The evidence was supposed to be shared privately with Craig, who would then handle his marriage however he saw fit. Instead, we were heading for a supervised confrontation with legal representatives present. But perhaps this was better, cleaner. The truth out in the open where Heather couldn't twist or deny it, where healing could finally begin for everyone involved. I spent that night reviewing all the evidence again, making sure everything was organized chronologically and clearly labeled. I prepared myself mentally for Heather's accusations and attacks. And I reminded myself why I was doing this. Not for revenge, but because the truth matters. Because Craig and those children deserved better. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their own actions. Tomorrow would be difficult, but it would also be necessary. The final act in a drama none of us had chosen, but all of us were now irrevocably part of. Dr. Winter's office was designed to feel non-threatening, soft lighting, comfortable furniture, muted colors. But nothing could diminish the tension as we all gathered there the following afternoon. Craig arrived first. Having just come from telling the children about the separation with Dr. Winter's help, his face was drawn, eyes red-rimmed, but there was a certain calm about him now. The worst had begun, and he was facing it head-on. "How did it go with Emma and Liam?" I asked quietly. "About as well as it could," he replied. Emma had questions, Liam cried, but Dr. Winters was amazing with them. He swallowed hard. "They're with my parents now. Dad's taking them for ice cream." Heather arrived 20 minutes late, a power move designed to make everyone wait for her. She swept in wearing a cream-colored dress that screamed innocent victim, her hair and makeup impeccable. Her attorney, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, followed close behind. "I see you've brought reinforcements," she said coldly, glancing between Craig and me. "And, my dear sister, of course you're here." "Miss Reed," her attorney warned quietly. "Remember what we discussed." Dr. Winters, a calm, authoritative presence, gestured to the seating arrangement. "Thank you all for coming. I suggest we begin by establishing some ground rules for this discussion." "I have nothing to discuss with her," Heather said, pointing at me. "This is between me and my husband." "That would be true if you hadn't involved Samantha directly by pursuing a relationship with her fiancé," Craig's attorney interjected. He was a reserved man named James Phillips who, Craig had told me, specialized in high-conflict divorces. "Alleged relationship," Heather's attorney corrected. "My client disputes the characterization of her friendship with Mr. Miller." "That's why we're here," Dr. Winters said, "to address these disputes directly and, hopefully, come to some understanding of the truth so everyone can move forward." What followed was the most excruciating 2 hours of my life. Craig's attorney methodically presented the evidence we'd gathered. The text messages, the photos of Heather entering and leaving the hotel, the credit card statements, the recorded conversations. With each new piece, Heather's face grew harder, her denials more desperate. "These texts could be fabricated," her attorney argued. "The phone records confirm their authenticity," James replied calmly. "As does Mr. Miller's sworn statement." That was news to me. I glanced at Craig, who nodded slightly. "He'd been busy." "Jason would say anything to save himself," Heather scoffed. "He's weak." "Perhaps we should ask him directly," James suggested. "He's waiting in the reception area." The blood drained from Heather's face. "You brought him here? How dare you?" Dr. Winters intervened. "No one is obligated to speak with Mr. Miller today, but if his testimony would help clarify the situation, it might be worth considering." Heather turned to her attorney, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, the attorney nodded. "We'll hear what he has to say. But I want it noted that my client maintains these allegations are exaggerated and motivated by her sister's jealousy." Jason entered looking nervous and diminished. Gone was the confident attorney I'd once loved. In his place stood a man who knew he'd made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences. "Mr. Miller," James began formally, "you've provided a written statement regarding your relationship with Heather Reed. Are you prepared to confirm its contents verbally today?" Jason nodded, not looking at any of us directly. "Yes, everything in my statement is true." "Including the timeline of when the relationship began?" "Yes. Heather and I became involved at the Reed family Christmas party last year, while I was still engaged to Samantha." "That's a lie," Heather interrupted. "He pursued me after they broke up." Jason finally looked at her. "Heather, please, it's over. We need to tell the truth now." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "You don't know the meaning of the word. You're just saving yourself, throwing me under the bus." "Could you clarify the nature of the relationship?" James continued, ignoring her outburst. Jason shifted uncomfortably. It was physical at first. Heather approached me at the Christmas party while Samantha was in the kitchen. She suggested we meet up. Said it would be exciting. No one would know. And you agreed? Dr. Winters asked, her tone neutral. I did, Jason admitted, shame evident in his voice. I was weak and flattered. Heather made it seem like a game. A game? Craig's voice was tight with controlled anger. My marriage? My children's stability? A game? Jason couldn't meet his eyes. I know now how wrong it was. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Your apology means nothing, Craig replied. Continue. The relationship continued after Samantha discovered the texts and ended our engagement, Jason explained. Heather convinced me we could be together eventually, once things settled down. That she would leave Craig when the time was right. Heather stood abruptly. This is absurd. He's lying to protect himself. Then how do you explain these? James produced printouts of hotel receipts, your credit card, the Madison Hotel. Every Thursday for the past 3 months. Business meetings, she said dismissively. In a hotel room? For 3 hours? Craig asked quietly. With my wife's sister's ex-fiancé? The room fell silent as the full weight of the evidence became undeniable. Heather's attorney whispered something in her ear, but she shook her head violently. I want to hear from my sister, Heather suddenly demanded, turning to me. Tell me, Samantha. Does this make you happy? Destroying my family? Taking away my children? Is this the revenge you wanted? I met her gaze steadily. This isn't revenge, Heather. This is the natural consequence of your choices. My choices? She laughed incredulously. What about your choice to spy on me, to record me without consent, to poison my husband against me? I didn't need to poison anyone against you, I replied calmly. Your actions did that all on their own. You've always been jealous of me, she spat. Always the pathetic little sister trying to measure up. Well, congratulations, you've finally found a way to tear me down. Heather, Dr. Winters interjected firmly. This approach isn't productive. What would be productive? She demanded. Admitting defeat? Letting my sister and my husband take everything from me? No one is taking anything from you, Craig said wearily. I'm seeking divorce because you violated our marriage vows repeatedly and showed no remorse. I'm seeking primary custody because you've demonstrated poor judgment and a willingness to use the children as bargaining chips. They're my children. They're OUR children, he corrected, and they deserve stability and honesty. Heather's composure finally shattered completely. She turned to me, eyes blazing. This is all your fault. You couldn't stand that I had everything while you had nothing. You've always been Dad's favorite, but I had everything else. A successful career, a beautiful family, respect. What did you have? A failed engagement and building sketches. You couldn't stand it, could you? Her words hung in the air, raw and revealing. For the first time, I truly saw my sister, not the perfect, polished version she presented to the world, but the deeply insecure woman underneath who measured her worth by external validation. I never wanted to take anything from you, Heather, I said softly. I just wanted the truth to come out, for Craig's sake, for the kids, even for yours eventually. Don't pretend you care about me, she snapped. Despite everything, I do, I admitted. You're my sister. I've spent my whole life looking up to you, thinking you had everything figured out. I never realized you were so unhappy. Something flickered in her eyes, vulnerability, quickly masked by renewed anger. Save your psychoanalysis. This isn't about my happiness, it's about loyalty. Family is supposed to protect each other, not expose each other. True loyalty isn't enabling destructive behavior, I countered. It's holding those you love accountable. Her attorney placed a restraining hand on her arm as Heather opened her mouth to respond. After a whispered conference, Heather fell silent, her face a mask of controlled fury. The meeting concluded with practical discussions about next steps in the divorce process. Heather and her attorney left first, Heather not looking at any of us as she swept out. That went about as expected, James commented after they'd gone. Actually, better than I feared, Craig admitted. She didn't throw anything or threaten anyone physically. Dr. Winters made notes in her file. There's a long road ahead, especially regarding the children, but having everything out in the open is an important first step. As we prepared to leave, Jason approached me hesitantly. Sam, can we talk for a minute? Craig looked at me questioningly, but I nodded. It's fine. I'll meet you outside. When we were alone, Jason struggled to meet my eyes. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. What I did to you was unforgivable. Yes, it was, I agreed. I know I have no right to ask, but do you think you could ever forgive me? Maybe we could even try again, eventually? I stared at him, genuinely shocked. Are you serious right now? He misinterpreted my response as encouragement. I've always loved you, Sam. Heather was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. Jason, I said firmly, what you did wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices made over and over again for months. You betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, with my own sister. There is no coming back from that. But I've changed, he insisted. This whole experience has made me realize what really matters. What matters is integrity, I replied. Something you've demonstrated you don't have. I don't hate you anymore, Jason. I feel nothing for you at all. And that's the best you're going to get from me. I left him standing there and joined Craig outside, feeling lighter than I had in months. The confrontation had been brutal but necessary. The truth was finally out, undeniable and irrefutable. The weeks that followed brought a cascade of family drama as the news spread. My mother remained in denial, insisting that both sides had made mistakes and we should all reconcile. My father, surprisingly, became Craig's staunch ally, helping him find a new home close to the children's school and offering support during the increasingly contentious divorce proceedings. Extended family took sides, as families do. Some believed Heather's spin that I had exaggerated things out of jealousy. Others recognized the overwhelming evidence and expressed shock at her behavior. Friends drifted away or stepped up, revealing their true character in crisis. Through it all, I focused on supporting Craig and being there for Emma and Liam, who were confused and hurting. Heather, meanwhile, doubled down on her victim narrative, posting cryptic social media messages about betrayal and forgiveness that fooled no one who knew the truth. Jason moved to another state, his reputation in the legal community tarnished by the scandal. Last I heard, he was trying to rebuild his career at a smaller firm, claiming a fresh start. And me? I was finally free of the shadow that had loomed over me my entire life. Not because Heather had fallen, but because I had finally stopped measuring myself against her impossible standard. In standing up for the truth, I had found my own strength. The family would never be the same. But maybe, just maybe, it could eventually be something better. Honest, authentic, and built on genuine connection rather than appearances and competition. As the dust began to settle, I realized that what had happened wasn't really about revenge at all. It was about truth, consequences, and ultimately, the freedom that comes from facing reality, however painful it might be. 6 months after the confrontation in Dr. Winter's office, I sat on a park bench watching Emma and Liam chase each other around the playground. Their laughter, so free and uninhibited, was the sweetest sound I'd heard in ages. Uncle Craig said you're taking us for ice cream after, Liam called, waving frantically from the top of the slide. Only if you beat your sister down the slide, I called back, smiling as he immediately launched himself down with a whoop of delight. So much had changed in those 6 months. Craig had finalized the divorce, managing to secure primary custody of the children with Heather granted supervised visitation 3 times a week. The judge's decision had been influenced heavily by evidence of Heather's unstable behavior during the proceedings, including attempts to alienate the children from Craig and a disturbing incident where she'd shown up at his new home at 2 a.m., intoxicated and demanding to take her children back. Heather's perfect life had unraveled with stunning speed. Her marketing firm had asked her to take a leave of absence after she'd had a very public meltdown at a client meeting. Without Craig's income, she'd been forced to sell their lakefront home and move into a condo. The carefully curated social media presence had devolved into erratic posts alternating between self-pity and vague threats. The most recent development had been the most shocking. Heather had been caught attempting to access Craig's financial accounts using passwords she'd kept from their marriage. The bank had flagged the suspicious activity, and Craig's attorney was now pursuing legal action. It was as if once the facade cracked, everything beneath had collapsed completely. My relationship with my parents had evolved in unexpected ways. Mom initially refused to speak to me, blaming me entirely for destroying the family. But as Heather's behavior became increasingly erratic and the evidence against her mounted, Mom's rigid denial had slowly given way to a painful acceptance. "I don't understand where I went wrong with her," she'd confessed during a tearful conversation. "I always thought if I just pushed her to be perfect, she'd be happy." Dad, surprisingly, had become my strongest ally. He'd admitted that he'd always seen himself in me more than in Heather, appreciating my creativity and thoughtfulness in ways he'd failed to express when it mattered most. "I should have protected you more," he'd said one evening as we sat on his porch. "I saw how your mother favored Heather, how she encouraged the competition between you. I should have stepped in." "We all played our parts," I'd replied. "I accepted being the lesser sister for so long, it became my identity." My relationship with Craig had deepened in unexpected ways. Initially, I'd worried that he might associate me with the pain of Heather's betrayal, but the opposite had happened. Going through the fire together had forged a genuine friendship between us. He'd called me one evening, about 3 months after the divorce was finalized. "The kids keep asking when Aunt Samantha is coming over again. They miss you." I'd been surprised. "They do?" I thought Heather might have. Said things about me to them. She tried, he admitted. But they're smart kids. They see who shows up consistently, who asks about their day and really listens. They know who's genuinely there for them. So I'd become a regular fixture in their lives. Weekend outings, school events, holiday celebrations. I'd worried it might confuse them, having their aunt step into a more prominent role while their mother struggled, but Dr. Winters assured me that stable, loving adults were exactly what they needed during this transition. And then there was Mark. I hadn't been looking for a relationship, quite the opposite. After Jason, I'd sworn off dating entirely, convinced my judgment was fatally flawed. But Mark had appeared anyway, first as Craig's friend from his support group for divorced parents, then as something more. He was different from Jason in every way that mattered, thoughtful rather than showy, genuine rather than performative, kind without expecting applause for basic decency. On our third date, he'd looked at me seriously over dinner and said, "Craig told me what happened with your sister and ex. I want you to know I think you did the right thing, the brave thing, even though it cost you so much." It was the first time anyone had acknowledged the price I'd paid for telling the truth. Not just relationships lost, but the weight of responsibility. The night spent questioning whether I'd made the right choice, whether the truth was worth the pain it caused. Now, watching Emma conquer the monkey bars while Liam attempted to climb up the slide backward, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. This afternoon, Craig was meeting with his lawyer about the latest development in Heather's case, and Mark was joining us later for dinner at my place, a casual family meal that would have been unimaginable a year ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Heather, the first direct communication in months. "I need to talk to you, alone. It's important." I hesitated, then showed the message to Mark when he arrived at the park. "What do you think?" I asked. Part of me wants to ignore it, but she's still your sister, he finished, understanding immediately. "Whatever she did, however much she hurt you, that connection doesn't just disappear." "No, it doesn't," I agreed. "I just don't want to get pulled back into the drama." "Set clear boundaries," he advised. "Public place, limited time, specific topic, and I can wait nearby if you want backup." The meeting was set for the following day at a coffee shop downtown. I arrived early, choosing a table with clear sightlines to the entrance and exit. Mark sat at the counter, pretending to work on his laptop but keeping a protective eye on the situation. Heather arrived looking nothing like her former polished self. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her face free of makeup, her clothes simple and understated. Without the armor of perfection she'd always worn, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and strangely more like me than she ever had before. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair across from mine. "What's this about, Heather?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She took a deep breath. "I've been in therapy, intensive therapy. My lawyer suggested it might help with the custody situation, but it's become more than that." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I've been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder," she said quietly, "with traits of borderline personality." My therapist says it explains a lot of my behavior patterns, the need for admiration, the lack of empathy, the instability in relationships. I see, I said, not sure how to respond. It made sense, certainly, but a diagnosis didn't erase the pain she'd caused. I'm not saying this excuses anything I did, she continued, as if reading my mind. It just helps me understand why I'm like this. Why I could do such terrible things to people I should have loved. Including your own children, I couldn't help adding. She flinched but nodded, especially them. I've been using them as extensions of myself, not seeing them as individuals with their own needs. Her eyes filled with tears. I want to be better for them, Samantha. I don't want them to grow up with a mother like I've been. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of compassion. That's good, Heather. They deserve that. I know you probably don't believe I can change, she said. I wouldn't, in your position, but I'm trying, really trying. Why are you telling me this? I asked. What do you want from me? Nothing, she said, surprising me. I just thought you deserved to know that you were right, about everything. You saw through me when no one else would or could, even myself. It wasn't an apology, not explicitly. But coming from Heather, it was unprecedented acknowledgement. What about Mom and Dad? I asked. Have you talked to them about this? She shook her head. Mom can't handle it. She still wants to believe I'm perfect, and hearing about a personality disorder would shatter that completely. Dad, maybe someday. He's been supportive of Craig, which I resented at first but now understand. We talked for another half hour. More openly than we had in our entire lives. There were no dramatic reconciliations. No tearful hugs or promises to rebuild our relationship. Just a quiet acknowledgement of truth and pain and the long road ahead. As we prepared to leave, Heather hesitated. Can I ask you something? Do you think, someday we might be, not like before, but something? Sisters in some real way? I considered the question seriously. I don't know, Heather. Trust, once broken like this, doesn't just mend because we want it to, but I believe in healing and growth. So maybe someday. It was the most honest answer I could give. That Thanksgiving, our first holiday since the divorce, was a study in contrasts from the year before. Instead of the tense, performative gathering at my parents' house, we had a smaller, warmer celebration at Craig's new home. Emma and Liam had decorated with handmade turkeys and paper chains. Dad brought his famous pumpkin pie. Mom had elected to spend the holiday with Heather, a choice that hurt but that I understood. Mark fit seamlessly into the gathering, his easy humor and genuine warmth a balm to the lingering wounds of the past year. As we sat around the table, Craig raised his glass. I'd like to propose a toast, to truth, however difficult, to family, however imperfect, and to new beginnings, however unexpected. To new beginnings, we all echoed. Later, as Mark and I drove home, he reached for my hand. You know what I was thinking back there? What's that? I asked. A year ago, you were sitting at a different Thanksgiving table, engaged to a different man, trapped in family dynamics that were slowly crushing you. Look at you now. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words. It's strange, isn't it? I spent so long thinking Heather had everything I wanted, the perfect life, but it was all surface, no substance. And now? Now I know what matters. Truth, authenticity, real connection. I squeezed his hand. I wouldn't trade what I have now for any amount of perfect Instagram moments. The road ahead wouldn't be simple. Heather's journey toward genuine change would be long and uncertain. My parents' marriage was strained by their differing responses to the family crisis. The children would need ongoing support to process the changes in their lives. And I was still learning how to define myself outside of Heather's shadow, how to trust my own judgment again after being deceived for so long. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't measuring my happiness against someone else's yardstick. I wasn't looking at what Heather had and feeling lacking. I was building something genuine, something that couldn't be captured in perfect social media posts, but was infinitely more valuable. A life of integrity, honest relationships, and hard-won wisdom. Sometimes family karma doesn't look like revenge at all. Sometimes it simply looks like truth finding its way to the surface, washing away pretense, and allowing everyone to finally see each other clearly. The facade of perfection that Heather had maintained for so long had been her prison as much as it had been mine. Now we were both free to fail, to learn, to grow, and maybe someday, to heal. Looking back on that moment at Caitlin's birthday dinner, when Heather had smirked and asked about my +1, I realize now it wasn't the beginning of this story, but the end of an old one. The story of two sisters locked in competition, of secrets and lies, of measuring worth through others' eyes. What began that night was something entirely new, a journey toward authenticity that would transform not just me, but our entire family. Have you ever experienced family karma in your own life? Not revenge, but that moment when truth finally breaks through and changes everything? If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. We heal by sharing our stories and knowing we're not alone in these complicated family dynamics. If you found value in my journey, please consider subscribing to hear more real family stories like this one. Your likes and shares help these stories reach others who might be struggling with similar situations. Thank you for listening to my story with such openness and compassion. It's through connection that we all find our way forward, one truth at a time.